Hello, everybody. I'm Dan Lapel for New Focus Recordings, and I'm really happy to be joined here by Jackie Leclair, whose new CD, Music for English Horn Alone, came out last Friday, and we're celebrating the release this week. Hey, Jackie, how's everything going?
Fantastic. Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
It was our pleasure. Wonderful recording, and really glad that we could make this happen.
Thank you.
So, uh, I think one of the really special things about this recording from my perspective, and this is sort of just coming from talking to you and reading some of the things you've written, is how rare it is to feature the English horn in this capacity, right? I mean, I think we so often think of it as a special hitter, like a special case orchestral instrument that brings this wonderful color. And now we get sort of a full length complement of the range of the instrument. How much performing of solo English horn rep have you done like over the course of your career? And is it a new thing for you, or is it something that's been developing for a long time?
Well, I first played English horn when I borrowed one to play an all-state orchestra when I was
Right.
16, 17, and I played the William Tell Overture, and I just was thrilled, completely out of tune, but having such a great time. It's just such a wonderful instrument to play when you're an oboist because you pick up the English horn, it's like, wow, this is great, and then you realize, wow, I'm completely out of tune. So there's a journey to go on from just kind of beginner's luck and just having a good time playing the English horn, and this may be with other auxiliary instruments, for clarinet to bass clarinet. But then you have to go on a journey to develop what I think of as a primary relationship with the horn. That I play the oboe, and I've played this thing since I'm 8 years old. But then to develop, at sort of aspire to have as strong a relationship with the English horn because in a lot of ways you do the same things, you push the same keys, but different notes come out. You have to learn to discern between timbre and pitch. That's a big one. The two instruments have very different tendencies in terms of adjustments for pitch. So it takes a long time. To answer your question, I think I've played more, probably a lot more solo English horn repertoire and performances over the past, 30 years or so than most oboe players,
Mhm.
which is I've played a lot, probably most of the orchestral solos in orchestras. That's a lot of fun to do, great challenge. But winding up in New York City, playing a lot of contemporary music, I was just thrown a lot of opportunities to perform solo English horn pieces. And I just thrilled whenever I get an English horn part to play. Then it's usually an oboe slash English horn part. I'm just completely happy.
Yeah.
And normally there's either an English horn player and an oboe player, or you're the only one and you play oboe and swap to English horn at some point. And very rarely there's only an English horn and no oboe in the piece. And the only pieces I know that are like that are four pieces by Oliver Nussin.
Uh,
Oliver Nussin, who died in July 2018 in his 50s, he wrote he came out of the British tradition of Vaughan Williams and Benjamin Britten, but Nussin really picked up where Debussy and Stravinsky and Ravel left off, because those are the three people who wrote in really interesting ways for the English horn. That's the first time the English horn came out of its little dressing room and powdered uh, niceties and did some really interesting dynamic characters. The first one was 1890, was it 495, The Afternoon of a Faun.
mhm.
And Debussy subsequently wrote quite a number of well-known orchestra pieces that use the oboe, the English horn, as in solo and soli capacities that are just terrific. And Ravel did, if you think about it, some really notable cor anglais parts, but especially Stravinsky. He really did. He just went his own direction, and I feel as though Nussin, who was mentored by Benjamin Britten, Nussin was personally, um, he he really picked up and sort of blended all those traditions to write these wonderful pieces, like Songs Without Voices and
Oh,
um,
well,
Hums and Songs of Winnie the Pooh.
cool.
Just
I'll have to
oh,
have to
just
have to look into that.
oh
That
my God, it's
sounds nice.
gorgeous. It's just
Yeah.
gorgeous. And it's just really striking that it's only English horn in a small chamber orchestra,
Mm.
chamber ensemble, um, with a fully developed role to play, and it. I just adore it. It's so inspiring. So that's part of where I'm coming from. But yeah, I've played the English horn a lot. That's true.
Yeah. I mean, do you find that composers generally have, I mean, they're probably not quite as familiar with the intricacies of the English horn as they are with the oboe, I would guess, right? Or, but I mean, how wrong can they go? Is it the kind of thing where someone who has a lot of fluency with the oboe will write a piece for English horn and you'll have to sort of get into a long dialogue to try to sort of fix things, or is it, I mean, as you say, things are more or less laid out the same. It's
Hmm.
just different resultant pitches, right?
Yeah, it's a big oboe. It goes
Yeah.
5 notes lower. Yeah, it's a big oboe, and the bell is shaped like that, which makes it a little bit more sound like that.
Yeah.
Makes it this piquant sound. Um, yeah, I mean, of course there are differences, but there are many more similarities than differences. Um, the way I approach music is I trust composers to do what they think, to dive into their imaginations, to really be as authentic as they can, not to write me a keyboard part, try to write me an English horn part um, that you really think is for the English horn, the voice, the soul, or whatever you want to think about of the instrument that makes it special. And then my approach is like I find a way to do it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm a big fan of making the impossible possible. It's all up here, and there's a lot of things I haven't done before, maybe, but it's a mistake in most cases to think that that's impossible. Well, you haven't done it before, that's true, but you can do it if you just find your elasticity in your mind and um, the finger can move. It's the brain. So um, I think any other underrepresented group of people. Like if you don't have role models, well, how are you going to go there? If you want to be a ballet dancer and you're an African American woman, well, it's only lately that there's people like Misty Copeland that you can actually be like, oh yeah, I could do that. And
Right.
that's just an important part of what's going on. That if you've heard how many cool flute parts, how many cool clarinet riffs, how many amazing trumpet fanfares. It's just there, like, of course. Plus, you've got all kinds of jazz and pop flute, and you've got all kinds of folk flutes, and you've got klezmer, and of course, jazz clarinet was the licorice stick before the saxophone took over as jazz. So there's this, even if you're not trying to have a huge cultural imagination for the vocabularies of the instruments, it almost just seeps into your thinking as a composer, I would think.
Sure.
And then you've got the lonely little oboe, English horn, and bassoons that people don't even know what our names are. I mean, I promise you, if I went into the park here on a busy afternoon and stopped 500 people, said, what is a cor anglais? What is an English horn? I would give you $1,000 if I got more than 2 right answers.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I'm willing to put good money on it.
I think you're probably right. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's like, wow, this is a little underrepresented.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's a great period that we should all take advantage of, of reconsidering our assumptions, reconsidering, because you don't know you have assumptions, right? So to ask, well, what did I think about the English horn? Oh, what did I think? Did I think at all about the English horn? And to realize that what's modeled in the common repertoire is almost exclusively prayerful, shepherd, herding pastoral, sad, mournful, bucolic. That's
Sure.
When have you ever heard an English horn play staccato or high?
Right. Right.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, we can play staccato. Um, so it's really been very painted into a corner and typecast, if you will.
Yeah.
It's like William Shatner making an appearance for 60 seconds in a movie.
Yeah.
Why make a cameo every time I play an English horn? You show me an orchestra part with an English horn part, I'll show you a slow, beautiful solo. And yes, I
Right.
can play it, but it's really just like imagine if that's all you got to play.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm a guitar player,
Oh,
and I'm very sympathetic to what you're talking about because obviously we get typecast. If it's a nylon string guitar part, then it's almost always going to have some kind of Spanish component or flamenco component. If it's an electric guitar component, electric guitar part, it's often going to have some kind of rock and roll component. I think saxophone players obviously deal with this too. And I feel like that's why it's always fascinating to see pieces like Karola's piece, for instance, which really takes the instrument and sort of washes away whatever preconceptions might have been there and just deals with it on its own merits and creates something very new. And that's the piece we'll talk about in a few minutes. But maybe we'll use this to segue to talk about the first piece on the album, which is by Meera Gudipati, and it's called Ashakiran, based on a Hindustani Indian classical rag by Ravi, a morning rag. How did you come across this piece?
I came across this piece because, having spoken with my alumna Carly Gordon and having decided to develop a joint presentation for the Double Read International Conference coming up in 6 months, we were launched on that plan, and she came up with a talk, a paper she read, and a PowerPoint, which was fantastic, with a whole history of how the music of underrepresented composers is marginalized and so on over history, and debunking myths and that kind of thing. And I chose 7 pieces to interpolate excerpts or short pieces. I played the entire piece. I interpolated between her PowerPoint slides. So we did that. So one of the first things I did after hatching that plan with Carly was to simply go onto Facebook and say, hey, I'm looking for pieces for English Horn Alone by underrepresented composers. Boom. And I got a large number of suggestions. And one of them was one of Meera's friends said, my friend just wrote this piece. I think it's really good. It's influenced by Indian classical music in a really great way. And I was like, okay. And so he put me in touch with her, and I said, hey, look, this is what I'm doing. And she sent me a scan of her piece. And I looked it through, and I thought, you know what? I think this is really good. And it spoke to me. It seemed evident. I felt like I understand what it was all about, even just kind of glancing through it, or I had a sense. And then I spent, a year with it. I spent, 9 months anyway, developing my relationship with the piece. That's one of the pieces I really take off the page. I very much interpret it and find my own way with it, rhythmically and with the pitch bends and all that kind of thing. So that's how I found that piece. Yeah.
Should we take a listen to a short excerpt of this one?
Great.
Cool. Here we go. That was an excerpt from Meera Gudipati's Ashakiran. And though not the excerpt that we just heard, but I did read in the program note, Jackie, that at the end of that piece, there's an improvisatory section where the composer invites the performer to improvise on the rag by Ravi. How does she notate that?
Sure, that's notated. There's a low, the part comes down to a low written D, so sounding G, decrescendo. And then she wrote, improvise freely for 30 to 60 seconds. using these fragments as inspiration. The fragment may or may not be used explicitly. Seek a meditative and explorative quality. Then she wrote, something like 24 notes and figures and stuff. And then a long written D, again sounding G, 2 octaves higher than the one before the improv. So I didn't actually plan it at all. It's an improv, right? So,
sure. Yeah.
so,
But
yeah.
she
So
actually gave you some different figures with like various contours, or
yeah, this
cool.
is it right there.
Oh, wonderful. That's great.
Yeah. So the sort of thing I just digest it and try
Yeah,
things
of
out.
course. Yeah.
And then in the studio, I at the end of the piece, when we finished recording it, I just recorded the improv,
Yeah.
and I took I think it's a very simple, very meditative approach.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like that I was taking the approach that the piece was concluded, and this was more of a reflection and a sort of a sort of looking inward. And she composes, the last note is a long note in crescendo to fortissimo from pianissimo, and it's written very long.
Yeah.
So it's leading up to a very long, almost explosive note. So I
Mm-hmm.
was pacing it for that. Yeah, but it's a 30-second improv, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's really it's an effective way to end. Great. So should we move on to one of the pieces later on in the program?
Sure.
We're going to talk about Layered Lament by Faye-Ellen Silverman. And this is the one piece on the album that is electroacoustic, so it includes electronics.
Yeah.
And just in reading through the notes for this piece, it was cool to discover that the sounds for the electronic part were fashioned by Vladimir Ussachevsky. So it's sort of like an old school link to the earlier days of electroacoustic music.
Exactly. The tape days. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I love the sound world that she got. I mean, this is always something that seems to come up with certain electroacoustic pieces, and people say, "Oh, well, those sound dated," or they never sound dated to me personally. Like I love that era. I love that, and on top of that, these sounds particularly didn't sound dated. It sounded very environmental, as opposed to sort of little brick and brack stuff. And so it was interesting. I mean, but it's the earliest piece on the program, 1984, right?
Mm-hmm.
But fits very beautifully within all the 21st century pieces that they're on this recording. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I heard Stuart Buzinski perform it. There's a video of him performing it live in New York City, probably just a few years ago. That's how I discovered the piece, and probably because I was just looking around online for what Stuart was up to. I'm a fan of his, and I thought to myself, "Wow, that is a great piece. That's just boom. That's don't need to say more than that. I hear it,
Right.
and I could feel it. It's like I could just." Yeah, I could do that. Yeah, and I like that. I like that sense of a period piece in a sense, But I agree with you. It doesn't sort of become. I mean, the Beatles don't lose their.
Right.
I
Sure.
mean, I suppose somebody thinks they do, but most
Right.
of us don't.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it's got a flavor that, I mean, thank goodness it has its flavor. Thank goodness we don't have all the same flavor.
Yeah.
I love that, and I liked when I was speaking with, I think it was Meera. She said that when the strings started, the string sound, it was like, oh, that's not an English horn, so it strings for a while, and then the English horn comes in explosively, and she was saying how it's turned around. Normally it's the strings, and you just hear a little bit of the English horn, and here it's sort of flipped. That
Yeah.
the English horn is actually the dominant presence, and I thought that was really interesting. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
It's a really fun, it's challenging piece. It's got a lot of
Yeah.
it's got a lot of neat things to wrangle and find ways to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the music is a lot of fun. So yeah, I love doing that. That was really great luck that I discovered that piece.
And the tape part is fully notated, as if, sort of Davidovsky style. You're playing chamber music with
Yeah.
a rhythmically notated tape part. Yeah,
Yep.
that's what it sounds like. Yeah.
Yep. It's just right there in meter and
Yeah.
written. Yeah. Just really easy to follow. And
Yeah. Great.
the CD now. You get the CD with the score. You just throw it in
Right.
there, and of course you do it with your computer now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super fun to do. Super great. Really effective. Works
Yeah.
great as a interesting color on a recital. Oh,
Sure.
absolutely.
No, I mean, it starts with a tape intro too,
Yeah.
right? Which is this nice contrast because we have so many pure solo pieces on the recording.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, like you said, it's like, oh, wait, wow, you have to do a double take, and then you realize. And the excerpt we're going to listen to is later on in the piece where everything's integrated, and you're sort of
Right. You get
sparring a
both
bit
the
more with
electronics and yeah.
yeah. Okay, let's take a listen. This is 1 minute from Faye-Ellen Silverman's Layered Lament, written in 1984. Wonderful. That was 1 minute from Faye-Ellen Silverman's Layered Lament for English horn and electronics. And the last excerpt we were going to take a listen to is a piece by Karola Obermüller, Different Forms of Phosphorus. And this is something she wrote in 2020, right? It actually was finished this year, right?
Yeah, she finished it in March, and I recorded it in May.
Wow. So it's a COVID project too, on top of everything else.
Oh yeah, very
Yeah.
much so. Yeah, she came to Montreal just pre-COVID. We got together here in Montreal in February when I was about to record the first five pieces.
Yeah.
And she and I worked together and did some sightseeing, had a great little visit. But we worked together quite a few hours. I played through the first part of the piece, but she didn't. And later she composed the last 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes of the piece, kind of got it all finalized. But the really gnarly part, were in terms of technique and rapidity and density of events,
Yeah.
that showed up in my inbox in March. I was like, well,
Right.
I know what I'm doing the next 8 weeks.
And that's the part where she really integrates the multiphonics within like a texture that has passage work and everything else, right?
Yeah, it's the piece kind of accelerates.
Right.
It starts out unmeasured, and each line is a duration, like 60 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
with no rhythm written out. And then a couple pages later, it becomes, well, the lines become a little bit shorter, but still in real time. And then you enter a slow, normally written music in a meter, but it's slow still. And then then with about 3 minutes to go, it starts to really cook, and where it really takes off, which I can see in my mind's eye. But when you're getting a lot more shorter, rapid, close events, that's where we pulled back the extreme reverb a little bit, because it was just the pieces notated with extreme reverb, because that's part of the composition. We can talk about it a little if you want. But at that point, it was a little too much. So we reduced it by a tiny bit, the reverb, so that you could hear it dryly enough to get enough of the detail.
Yeah. Do you think this only just occurred to me now, but I know that her sort of point of inspiration, the title being Different Forms of Phosphorus, and she's sort of interested in this geological rate of change, right?
Right.
Do you think that there was some sense that the reverb would sort of evoke this cavernous, maybe cave-like? Was that part of the motivation? That
I think so. In
yeah,
in my, I won't speak for her, but
yeah,
but my sense is that there's, what is it? There's red phosphorus and white phosphorus, and it's extremely unstable.
mm-hmm.
So to me, I was inspired by all the different kinds of instability, which are many in this piece, many different flavors of instability. It's by the actual nature of the element itself. It can exist on its own, not bound with another element, but it really likes to bind with other elements. So it's running around trying to find other elements to latch onto. And this is non-expert talking here. And it's essential for life. Phosphorus is. So the idea that there doesn't seem to be a lot of phosphorus. Evidence suggests there's not a lot of phosphorus. It's rare actually in other parts of the universe,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of suggests maybe we are pretty alone. And so there's this feeling of this vastness of space, and also phosphorus is getting severely compromised by global warming, as you can
Yeah.
imagine. So it's kind of a love letter to the earth and to life itself. So there's kind of a cavernousness, that
Mm-hmm.
kind of like a cathedral or a giant cave somewhere, or the universe itself.
Yeah.
And there's a kind of a loneliness, maybe you might hear in it, and there's maybe a sadness to it, but there's a lot of humor and a whole bunch of other stuff in it too that you might hear. People hear a lot of different um, colors and even different instruments. People think that I'm playing different instruments, and I'm not.
Right. Right. Wow.
So, but yes, it is very much from this actual description of phosphorus and its actual role in life and the universe, and its poetic, the one's feeling about those things, about the element itself, its qualities, and the element's role in our lives and in the future, and those thoughts. Yeah.
Great. Well, let's take a listen to this, which I feel like this is sort of the climactic passage in a way, right? The one that
Mhm.
you chose. Everything's getting integrated together, all the different elements, right? So this is 1 minute, or possibly a slightly more than 1 minute, from Karola Obermüller's Different Forms of Phosphorus. So that was a little bit of Karola Obermüller's Different Forms of Phosphorus. And it's a really wonderfully developed vocabulary of extended techniques in this piece, a lot of multiphonics and several other techniques. You want to talk about that a little bit, and maybe the process of working with Karola on that?
Sure. I recorded and sent her some examples of multiphonics. There's quite a few multiphonics in here, and quite a few of them are ones I'd never played before. I found going by her specifications as she was in the compositional process. But everything else, especially all the rapid um, all the detuning, the quarter tones, but smaller microtones as well. The different kinds of vibrato, the different kinds of pitch bending. That's all from her. That's all just her imagination. And some composers, some very accomplished composers I know who listened to it, they assumed that she played the instrument. And I said, no, pretty sure she doesn't play the instrument at all. I don't know how, from her imagination, she came up with this. It's just amazing, and it's unlike anything I've seen on English horn. Flute, sure, violin, of course, but I've never even heard of a piece like this exploring these kinds of this kind of expressive vocabulary. It was definitely a first for me in every sense. So I had a very short period of time to learn it. The second half of the piece that I got, or first part of the piece I'd had a long time, the lugubrious part.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's important especially when you have unusual techniques, to imagine it really, really vividly. And for me, that involved taking the instrument, figuring out, okay, what is this pitch? What is this interval? What is this going to sound like? And I had to decide what fingering I'm going to use, because there's 2 or 3 possible fingerings for most of those. So I had to determine that. It was a decision-making process. A series of judgments had to be made. And then attendant to that, what embouchure air adjustments are made, because you don't just push the buttons and make the sound. You have to tune it by ear. So using my ear, I determined, okay, this is the fingering and this is the embouchure adjustment. But for every single event, it was just an incredible density of information and different. Instead of playing familiar notes you've played all your life, you're playing unfamiliar notes you have just learned in rapid succession. And
Right.
That's a part where your head explodes. So it was a very intensive learning process. But the most important thing, once I figured out, okay, this is the way I'm going to do it, then to go through and develop a really, really vivid poetic imagination of it. Because there was a Norwegian violinist, I forget his name, but he mentioned in a Menuhin competition masterclass. I watch violin masterclasses for fun. I think they're the best.
That's cool.
They're so great. There's so many leagues ahead of us. I just drink them up, masterclasses. This is a Menuhin competition masterclass. And this wonderful Norwegian violinist, he said something I really loved. He said, "You can never play better than you think." And I think it's real easy to pick up your axe and go play, and you're not really thinking. You're somehow thinking you're going to magically get better. No,
Right.
Think it. Think it. So I spent a lot of time just thinking, what is this going to sound like? And sort of memorizing this new language. Very rapid language acquisition, really. So that when by the time I was recording it 8 weeks later, it felt very natural. It felt like I was singing it. For me, it has to be sung. Everything I play, it has to be like my voice singing it, period. There's no exceptions to that. It has to be 100% vocal and feeling, which has to do with the technical production of it and the voicing, the tongue position, the air, the resonance of the body, everything has to be working together from the soles of your feet up, and serving a poetic, personal language. So that for that piece, I had to just, it's not like Telemann where you know all the notes. I didn't know any of the notes. So I had to build it and then get the poetry going and then make it happen. So it was an incredibly rewarding 8-week adventure I went on.
Well, the final track is really great, and as you say, it's totally a unique piece for the English horn, but a unique piece. Period. I mean, it's just it's been a joy getting to know the whole record, but especially that piece, I think. And there's one more thing that I sort of intentionally didn't want to bring up until later on in the chat, but it is a fact that all the composers on this record are females. But it also is laudable on that front. So I don't know if you want to speak to that issue at all, or.
Yeah, well, I think we're having the conversation. We're having it more and more. We're realizing that this concept of the Western canon that's almost entirely white men, that it's not a fixture. It's not unassailable. It's not something you mustn't ever question. I think it's something we can examine a lot more intelligently and with critical thinking and an enhanced understanding of the historical context, and with questioning our own assumptions, and just sort of have the scales fall from our eyes and just become more informed. The thing about making assumptions is you don't know you are.
Sure.
And so to work together as a community and to be, humble enough and brave enough to realize, I've been doing stuff that doesn't make a lot of sense. I should change the way I roll. Yeah, and I've gone through that process myself. But yeah, I mean, I trust that the listener can figure out that all the composers are female, and three are people of color, and and there's also, so there's diversity and inclusiveness, but the musical styles, there's so many different musical languages. It's extremely diverse musically. So
Yeah.
to think about the musical diversity and respect, that there's the kind of music that you might think is common, tonal or modal, that, oh, that's beautiful. Well, yeah, but what's this other music? Is that, what is that? What are you thinking about that? Do you have a negative association with that, or what? So I think to have the musical diversity there, along with the humanity diversity, and then to what's actually really important to me, as I was talking about earlier, is to have to present the English horn as this underrepresented instrument.
Mm-hmm.
The English horn itself, I'm not going to imbue it with civil rights or anything, but really, imagine if the viola only had as much to play as the English horn does.
Right.
It would, even viola, it would be absurd. So I think, I really am throwing down the gauntlet and say, look, this instrument can play anything, and you can hold it up. You don't need a neck strap. I didn't use a neck strap ever in the past 20, 30 years. I've never used a neck strap. If you use balance and ease and strength, you can play the English horn hours and hours a day in good health. And I think it would be helpful as a community if we came to a greater consciousness raising of, let's respect this instrument more. Let's respect each other more. Let's respect different musical styles more. I think the days of people who play orchestral music speaking disrespectfully about unusual new music, it's like, you know what? That's not acceptable. That's disrespectful. It's not informed, and it's not healthy for students to hear that kind of thing. I think it's time as a community to be, you wouldn't say about a group of people that they're stupid. Well, you shouldn't say it about a group of kind of music either.
Yeah.
And so I think we have a long way to go as a community to be more respectful and smart in how we navigate ourselves and the instruments and the music.
Beautifully put. Thank you. And thanks so much for this great album. So this is FCR 272, came out last Friday, October 23rd. We are rolling it out this week because we had another release last week. We want to give both their ample time. Music for English horn alone, Jacqueline Leclair. Thanks again for joining us, and thanks to everybody out there who's watching. And this is something you can find at our website, on Bandcamp, and all other places where you buy and don't buy music. So thank you, and look forward to seeing everybody soon. Take care, Jackie. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.